if you think about it, robotics traditionally has very much been thought about as sort of traditional, behind the fence, moving around, and that's probably what it was in the 80s. But if we look at today, we're really changing robotics. Robotics is moving out, it's being used still in flexible manufacturing, it's being used in healthcare, it's being used in service applications. So it's very much broadening the horizon of the kind of applications that we're looking at. And for that reason, we said it's time to go back and look at how can we actually have this game changer and how can we use this to really make some real headway. So the way we went about this is that we said we need to first understand what are some of the socioeconomic opportunities. Where can we actually make money with this? Where are the opportunities of really creating new opportunities? From this, we then asked the question saying, given that there are all of these opportunities, why are we not doing it today? So we wanted to understand what are the obstacles that hinder us from actually being the leaders or making significant progress today. From those obstacles, we then asked the question, okay, given that these are the obstacles, what are the efforts that are needed to remove those obstacles so that we can become one of the leaders? And from this, we then identified what are the goals we need to do in 5 years, in 10 years, and in 15 years of making real progress. Robotics, as I already said, is an enormously large field. So for that reason, we divided it into 4 different areas where we did in-depth sort of analysis. The first one was in manufacturing and logistics. The second one was in medicine and healthcare. The third one in service applications. All of these 3 are sort of driven forward by what are the market needs. And then we said, well, that's good. But there are also the possibility that there could be blue sky research that would be a game changer. And for that reason, we had a 4th workshop that was more on what are some of the emerging technologies, what's out there that would help us break this forward. And below this, you see that I had collaboration from quite a number of my institutions in organizing this. The way we organized the overall process was that it was an open process. So we advertised open calls for participation in our studies. We then, from the call for the submissions of participation, selected people to be on these workshops. We had about 40% from industry and 60% from academia. We generated a draft report that we made available to the community and received feedback from quite a broad set across the US. From this, we integrated it in, and we now have a final sort of roadmap document that there are copies of these available outside on the table for you to take, and also there is, I can give you a URL at the end so that you can actually download it electronically. And I'm very pleased to say that there's been very broad participation across all of the areas of doing this. Let me briefly go and look at what are some of the main results that's in the roadmap. Before I do this, let me briefly mention one of the things that we've of course taken into account is that if you look at sort of the populational statistics or the populational pyramid for the US, then at the top you see this is sort of where the populational statistics is today. And as you can see, over time we will see a significant growth at the top. This is unfortunately a significant growth in the elderly population. That's going to challenge our society in a number of ways, and if you look all the way out to the projection for the census of 2050, you'll see an even more significant growth of the people 65 plus. And Rodney Brooks, one of my colleagues, will later on talk about how that's going to challenge us in a number of ways of doing manufacturing. Let me jump directly to what are we doing in manufacturing. About 11% of the GDP today is directly in the manufacturing industry. There is a significant follow-on industry in terms of materials, in terms of handling, in terms of logistics that feed into this. So in reality, something like 30% of our GDP is actually directly related to manufacturing goods. So it's a significant part of our economy. The focus there in terms of robotics in the past has very much been on large-scale industries. If you manufacture hundreds, thousands, or millions of a product. We see that in the future, this is not where the emphasis is. It's much more in bringing home manufacturing where it's been outsourced, and it's also trying to empower small and medium-sized enterprises to take up this challenge and use this to really grow a new economy. To do this, we need to have robots that are much simpler to use, they have to be much more versatile, and they have to be much more flexible. And in the roadmap, we outline how is this possible. Another area related to this is in the area of logistics. whenever you go to the grocery store and buy something, that particular item has been on at least one truck, but it's typically been on 8 or 10 trucks from manufacturing until it arrives at your shelf. That's a bit of a problem. One of the big problems there is that only about 15% of the overall process has been automated. So it's very costly, both in terms of manpower and in terms of energy. And the estimate is that you can actually optimize this process something like 20 to 30%, which would imply that your grocery store prices could be reduced by something like 5%. Trying to reduce your everyday goods by something like 5% is a pretty big deal. It would be a huge economic impact to have that, because it would be across all of us. To do this, we need to have flexible palletizing. They have to be easier to program. We need to do small series, and we need to be able to do delivery just on time. If you look at your average grocery store, they don't have storage anymore. They get it delivered, they put it on the shelf directly. This is what we need to be able to accommodate to be very efficient. For each of our processes, what we've tried to do to make sure that we are addressing really the societal needs, we've done this where we've had sort of on the right-hand side mapped out what are the applications that we consider to be some of the real game changers. From that, we mapped out what are the key capabilities that we need that we don't have today. And from this, we then, on the left-hand side, looked at these are the technologies that we need to invest in if we want to make this happen.